All right, hello, and welcome to another episode of Holy Unapologetic. My name is Marcus. I'm here with my good friend Ace. How you doing today, Ace?
Doing so good. It is sunny. The snow is melting. Love it.
Good, good. We are also here with another very special guest. This is my good friend Leo. Thank you so much for being here. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about. Leo and I actually met on set doing some background work, which was pretty fun. But I've gotten to connect in a lot of ways since. I've learned quite a bit from Leo that I would love to be able to share with our audience today. So, first of all, welcome, Leo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So, we want to talk about some things religion, some things spirituality, some things healing. We are a very open podcast in that way. So, where would you love to dive in? Before we hopped on today, we were sharing a little bit of Ace and my religious background. I know our audience has heard quite a bit about it, but wherever you would like to dive in.
Oh, goodness, throwing it right to me. Uh, I grew up Christian or whatever that means kind of deal because, really ultimately it's just a label that we identify with that isn't ultimately ourselves, but we then adopt that identity and then have it essentially take over as our egos or whatever. But yeah, growing up, I think I also grew up very, maybe a little different with it, what I call the hypocritical Christian,
Mm.
in which they would never do the things that are, said to be done kind of deal, but expected everyone else to do the things, you know. So I saw that dynamic a lot.
Mm.
And then also just like, I know for me, I was, I guess, the rebellious kid, and I never wanted to go to church. And then I questioned things, and how dare I question things? Questions, root of all evil. Once I was like 18, I wasn't like forced to go to church because I was like, well, I'm an adult now, kind of thing. And I went like the hard left atheist route, um, mainly just due to trauma and anger.
Mm. Yeah.
um, and it wasn't until 25, so I had gotten out of college at this point, and life shit got messy and dirty, and everything was just like, well, fuck, okay. Um, so then I got uh, into psychedelics, and that was kind of my turning point. Um, I was still very atheistic while experimenting. And I eventually, for lack of a better term, had a psychotic breakdown and became homeless. And through that, I eventually knew that there was more to life or reality or whatever you want to call it than just this like material existence, this physical 3D dimensionality due to all the substances I had partaken in and the, psychic adventures. And I just knew I didn't know shit about shit and
Mm.
was just lost in the dark. So I just started reading, studying, just absorbing as much information, and like I not in a way like, oh, this is now the new truth. This is what I'll adopt because these people said this or this people said this, so this is now my truth. And it was more of like, okay, I can discern information and process it and actually like weed out the shit. So I started just pulling things. And for me, when you have what I call like several fingers pointing at something, some concept that's not necessary, like cross culturally, cross spiritual traditions, and I'm like, if everyone's pointing at this thing, that might be a thing that's true. I don't know, thousands of years of human evolution, they're all like, that might be a thing, then it might be a thing. Um, and so eventually it got me to going back into Christianity and like relearning where the history of it is. Um, Before it was adopted by the, where it became the Roman Catholic Church, and then it became the major religion, and then it became the religion of the sword, essentially crossing through violence, and it was weaponized in order to be a warring religion kind of thing. Oh, you know what? Let's start. Do you know what the meaning of religion is?
I no.
This is my favorite thing. So it's a Greek word. It's like religare and like young or whatever, like union kind of thing, and it means to realign to the unity of oneself. And
Ooh, I
so
like that.
religion is to connect to the the deeper parts of you, because within you is divinity. It is not this thing outside of you that's been sold as this ego or this guy kind of thing, because God isn't a noun, it's a verb. And so
Mm.
when you are in that moment of connection with yourself that is beyond the filter of thinking or the momentary messages of emotions, in which you're the energy that is just animating ultimately you, or the capital U of the universe that you are, kind of deal. And so to have a religious experience kind of thing is tapping into your own power, tapping into the greater connection. If you in science, this is the quantum field kind of thing, where we, and if we're taking in that everything's quantum entangled, that you're ultimately connected to everything if you've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, like
Yeah.
you are the epicenter of all of that. And
Mm.
to connect into that, you have to be present, kind of thing.
Mm.
So if your mind's always thinking, all you see is the thinking. You see a filter kind of thing, and you're only going through a filter, and then you identify with the filter, but it's not you, it's just the identifying of the filter. And so you can take the filters away, and what's left is you. And when you're sitting with yourself kind of thing, you can then, this is the stillness. There's
Mm.
this preacher who's a Franciscan, actually he's not a preacher, he's a friar. And the difference is the monks, those people, they were outside of society kind of thing. They were the cloistered kind of thing. And the friar is mixed between them kind of thing. They are in society. They don't have the harsh, what was the, like, the fastings or the kind of deal rules of, no sex or whatever kind of thing, but they were to integrate with society, and that's the middle ground. But his name's Richard Rohr, and I really like his stuff because it really talks about. There's this one called "Becoming Stillness" that I really like, and it's about essentially, like, when we take the Bible, it's not this like literal history book, and a lot of people take it as this like literal history book that it's all like, well, that's what that means literally. And a lot of it, if not all of it, um, is an allegory for energies and expressions and just universal truths that exist within us. But if you never look inside, you never see those things, kind of thing. And since we ultimately are patterns, because that's one of the laws of the universe, is that there's rhythms, there's patterns, there's the seasons, there's all these things, and those exist within us. And so if we never see our thought loops, if we never see our emotional loops, we are stuck in them. We are controlled by them, we're driven by them, and then we are a slave to the thoughts, slave to the emotions kind of thing. But when you start to see your own thoughts and how because we're this magnet that all of our thoughts and all of our emotions and all our behaviors are linked together. And so when we, think, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit, you feel like you're a piece of shit. And then
Mm.
you act as if you're a piece of shit. And then you get shit quality life. And so that's essentially what you then manifested. And then a thing I recently heard is like, you're not really manifesting like the physical things. You're not manifesting this like, car or house or money. You're manifesting the person, the being that you are that has those things
Mm.
that can, or you're manifesting the person who is loving to be in the relationship kind of deal.
Mm.
Not that you're manifesting, oh, I need this loving partner because I'm, kind of thing, but you're manifesting the best version of yourself so that you can emit that love kind of deal.
I love that. I want to circle back on this idea of unity with oneself, being connected to yourself. This really fits in with things we've been talking about. Interestingly enough, I was accused by a Christian in my atheism as basically then being like an ego theist. So if you don't have a God to worship, you're just worshiping yourself as a bad thing. Whereas it sounds like the actual origin of religion is to be connected and unified with yourself. Something we were talking about with our last guest who had escaped a cult was how it seems like these power structures really do try to separate you from your connection to yourself and that own the beauty and the divinity of our own connection to our bodies. So would you say that early Christianity started out better in that way and then became basically the power structure that couldn't be farther from that truth, where it's like, no, you need the church, you need the pastor, you need this singular source of truth, you cannot figure it out yourself?
Well,
What's kind of the history there?
so for 300 years, you had the like pre-Christianity of before the Roman Catholic, uh, essentially everyone's got to be Catholic or die, kind of deal. And it also has roots of Greek. Um, Jesus is a Jesus is you, and Jesus is a an archetypal energy or form of consciousness kind of thing. So, like in the Greek, it's Dionysus, and Dionysus is not the god of wine. Dionysus is the god of pharmacia, the god of drugs, the god of ecstasy. And the reason Jesus has the long hair and looks the kind of feminine, kind of male is representative of um, the unity between what is divine masculine and divine feminine, which we can then take as your two hemispheres of your brain. So you have your right and your left hemisphere, and we're taking the logic and willpower of our left hemisphere with our creativity and intuition of our right hemisphere. And when we can connect them together, this is also called bilateral thinking in our brain, in which the brains can go through the colostrum and or different areas, start talking to each other. And so when they scan, like do brain scans of monks or Franciscan nuns in deep prayer, meditation kind of thing, it shows their brain all communicating. And
Mm.
so back to the getting to that connection thing, where that connection is when we reach that point of silence and stillness kind of deal, because thoughts is only one part of our brain communicating. And so we have like our prefrontal, our neocortex, which is like the newest part of the brain. And so our left side holds that like ego, that I am this guy that does these things, and we need that. And going to that, like, oh, you're just worshiping the ego. Well, when in what I call common Christianity, or the colloquial, what we call Christianity, that's just being egotistical for God. That's just putting, oh, I know what God thinks, and I know that God means this, and I know this, and that, and then you become self-righteous, and then you have to decide for that other people are the problem, because ultimately it's the victim mindset that is being cultivated in order to control through fear. Because I believe that what we call common Christianity is a form of mind control. And so
Mm.
this is why it's so easily adapted into cults and groupthink, and used for thousands of years as a weapon. And the all boys club of the Roman Catholic Church, because initially the first pope was not supposed to be Peter, it was supposed to be Mary Magdalene. And so because there's the Gnostics, and the Gnostics, they're writing, this is the time of Jesus, 100 years later, and they're writing all these books, and they take that. So you have the Old Testament, and the Old Testament, you have this very jealous, angry, wrathful God. And I've heard it in like two different ways of like, one part is that this is your wounded self. So if you take everything in the Bible as these are parts of you, then old God is the unhealed, wounded, jealous, angry, wrathful God that you haven't healed the parts of yourself. So your insecurities take control of you. They've rejected you because you've rejected a part of yourself. You are hurt because you believe that about yourself. So when someone says something that hits you and hurts you, it's ultimately you believe it about yourself. Because if I call you orange, okay, you're orange. But if I say something, oh, you can't do anything because of this, this, and this, and you believe that, then and that hurts you, that's ultimately a wound kind of thing. And so if old God is the unhealed, jealous, and this is why it's so hard to like pull the grip off of it, because it's scared, it's hurt kind of thing. And so then there's the New Testament God, which is supposed to be the enlightening or the healing process in which you then developed yourself. Because there's this idea that's like this ego death that when you have in like psychedelics, but it's kind of a misnomer. It's just that you can see the unhealed parts, and you have to then develop, because if you have like no ego, no sense of self, you're just a vegetable on the floor, just there. Just like, so like that doesn't do anything. We're not meant to just like completely just eliminate ourselves. And then that also, that comes from wounds of not accepting ourselves. So we think, oh, I must eliminate this evil version of me, but it's ultimately this wounded, unhealed, and it needs love and acceptance. And so like, the whole idea of the demons are, energetic invisible forces, or the dynamics in which are our life. And so things can go, positive or negative kind of deal. And so if we ignore and stay what is the darkness, which is ignorance, and the light is knowledge. And so if we go to that Garden of Eden story, the old God is like, no, do not touch that tree of knowledge, or you'll be banished out of this paradise. And it's really that once you're, which also there's two trees in the garden, the tree of life and tree of knowledge, and the tree of is an acacia elotica, and acacia elotica contains DMT. And so the tree of knowledge is DMT. And but when you know the knowledge of good and evil, this is then it evolves you out of your innocence, because we all grow up and not knowing anything. You're born and you're just blank slate baby, and then you get programmed in those formatting years, and then those first 7 years of your programming or formatting kind of thing, if bad information, which we all got because we grew up like this, gets put in there, especially something like, oh, you should be ashamed of your sexuality, or any of that, then that becomes this that's judging super ego or our God kind of idea, in which it's all like, oh, don't hide from this, you don't express yourself. And that's like the control mechanism of the common Christianity is, instead of going into the darkness, which is that unknown, and trying to learn from that unknown, it's avoid it. And avoidance is the most common trauma response. And
Mm.
so, I grew up in complete avoidance. We never ever had conversations. It was just like, oh, that didn't happen. I'm never going to talk about it again, kind of deal.
I think that is it's a great point of just how much in religion there's this idea that we have all the answers. We have it all figured out. And
Yeah.
like, if I don't know it right now, then someone that knows the book better, they'll have an answer for everything. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that was a really big one that I struggled with because I was like, but science, though, that's all about admitting you don't have an answer, and like all these cool inventions are based on someone just trying to figure stuff out. So I love that your journey here starts with like, I don't know shit about shit, but I think that is definitely seeming like some of the lattice work of this power structure is we have all of the answers. They're literally all of the answers. Don't question things, kind of the classics. And so it seems like there's always got to be a healthy amount of I don't have all this figured out, which is of course scarier than just being like, I know exactly what's going to happen when I die. I know, I know that there's an entity that loves me. That's much easier to believe than like, we don't actually know. But I think there's, even for myself too, finding more about early Christianity just then becomes fascinating from an anthropological perspective instead of it needing to be holy in a way. It's just, I find humans interesting enough, but it definitely seems to be a pattern of like, it's healthy to actually admit when you don't know something and try to
I
find the
mean,
answer and try to be informed as best you can. But other people are deeply uncomfortable with that because they're used to like, no, we already are in the right group with the right answers.
it's dealing with the uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And at their, I guess, that level, there's what's the whole thing? Wise people learn from everyone they encounter. Normal people learn from experiences, and stupid people know all the answers. And so it it's I think it comes a lot from a wounding of not knowing something, and that embarrassment of not knowing something. So it
Sure.
then has to be that, oh, I know, or at least I'm part of something that knows everything, and they don't want to ever be in the uncertainty. They don't want to
Hmm.
feel the uncomfortability. But that feeling of uncomfortability is important because that's how we grow. Because if you're never uncomfortable, you never grow.
Hmm.
And so, like, you will just stay in that comfort zone, and you'll, just like how my parents are, they just block themselves off from anything they don't want to see. They
Right.
just
Hmm.
hide. They live in baseball and church. So,
Yeah,
and
you can stay in these insulated bubbles, and anything
yeah,
outside of that is like, ooh. And
yeah.
and it can be so dangerous, especially in this recent history that we're in, of like anything that's different from what I already have been told is fake news. And and something I hate too is when people are like, and of course this is such a level of privilege to say like, oh, I don't watch the news. It's like, okay, but you're still getting these sound bites just watered down through your church and through all these other people you know. But there's almost like a pride in the ignorance to be like, oh, I don't get caught up in all that media stuff. Media is all fake, and it's like, so there's a lot. We could rant in a lot of different directions there, but I'm very familiar with that idea. If it's new, it's unfamiliar, then it's bad because it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to feel like I don't know things. But really, every bit of good in my life, every bit of growth has come through discomfort. I mean, when I left behind the corporate world, I took a couple years of not working. And that was, as much as that sounds like a vacation, I pretty much didn't take a vacation for 2 years because I was in this whole like unknown world. And so I tried a million new things and I took new classes and I did so many things for the first time, which is great. But you definitely need a different kind of energy level to be like, I'm going to go and be embarrassed all over again because now I'm going to go try to take a singing class, or I'm going to go try to learn stunts. Like I just did all of these different things, and you have to be ready to be embarrassed and you have to be ready to be seen as completely unprepared. But it was all these beautiful experiences that then helped me find the things I'm most passionate about. But there were times where I was like, man, it was, even though I really didn't like that other job by the end, I knew where I was going to like wake up, go to work. It was predictable. It was like, you can kind of understand why people hold on to like the devil they know, because
Mm-hmm.
there is such a calm that came with it. May suck, but at least I know what to expect. And there's that comfort in the chaos of life versus like literally having nothing on my schedule was almost kind of terrifying in a different way, and exciting, of course, too. But I can almost understand why we settle for things that are not good for us just because they're the things that we know and that are familiar and that maybe promise us order in a chaotic world and in a world where we don't have a lot of the answers.
And back to those like formatting years, especially when you have traumas in those formatting years. I grew up in chaos. My dad was a raging alcoholic, so that chaos becomes comfort.
Mm.
And when chaos is your comfort, and then you find peace, peace seems like boredom, because you've never had it before. Which early on, before I got into psychedelics and whatnot, I just kept on going to tragic relationship after chaotic relationship kind of thing, because I was comfortable with the chaos, and I was all like, oh yes, this flares up my nervous system, I'm in a flight or fight reaction on the daily. Oh, that was just growing up too, cool.
This must be love.
And so, back to that like stillness kind of thing, like I didn't have, like, I was this ball of chaotic energy just like going through life before I ever did any meditation or anything. And even then too, like once I did psychedelics, I had a lot of arrogance to get rid of too. I thought, oh, because I've done so much, I've reached so high pinnacles of life. Meditation, I don't need that shit. I'm great. I don't need therapy. I'm fucking, no, I know what which then eventually broke down and went to therapy and started doing meditation and yoga and all these things. But there was, like I had to 180 myself kind of deal, because going from that, not wanting to feel the insecurity, or the uncertainty, and like, coming from, oh, you have to know it all the time. And then, growing up, there was always like the arguments over just authority. Well, God, yeah. Well, God, that's the answer kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always struggled with authority. Never cared for it. I'm an anarchist at heart, because I ultimately believe that when we come to learn and govern ourselves, we'll never need government. Because when you know the truth of yourself and how we're all connected, and we're ultimately a giant family of one super being on another being called Earth, in a solar system, in a galaxy, and who's to say that the Big Bang or the observable universe is just the universe that we know, but it could be in a bubble of space, and there's even more bubbles of those universes of infinite possibilities. So
There's a line I really like from Midnight Mass where she has a similar moment. I love that show so much, but she ends saying like, I am the universe dreaming of itself.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I think is my life every time, but it's just a dream. It's a wish that's made over and over again. And then I'm going to forget, and I'm going to turn into the grass and the water and the rain. I love that monologue.
Yeah, that is,
it's
the end of the show is, I've watched it like 5 times, and I
gotta watch it again. It's such a good one. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your meditation practice, because that is something, interestingly enough, is actually kind of how we started talking when we were on set. But I have struggled for years to develop a practice. I just really struggle with it. But I really like your kind of body scan process. Do you mind kind of walking us through an example of that someone could try?
Yes, I have a question though. Do you have ADHD?
No.
Okay. So I have ADHD.
I love many people that do. So I'm very familiar with it, but not myself.
So, because like, all right. So there's passive meditation, which I'd say is that like just the focus on the breathing, and it's like the nothingness. You just like try to go absolve into the nothing. I'm not good at that. And then there's the active meditation. This is where I need to use that ADHD brain of mine to focus on something, like, because I can get
Sure.
into flow states. I like when I'm playing music, boom, I'm there. Oh, 4 hours passed. What? I should eat something. But what I do is more the active meditations. This is also kind of the yoga, the qigong, in which moving meditation, because I need more, I don't know, activation. So what I do is a visualization, and so like in yoga, it's connecting to the earth or visualizing your like roots going into the ground, connecting the core of the earth, bring that up, and bring that energy up all the way through into the heaven energy. In magic, it's going from that heaven energy, or what they call the middle pillar, and then bringing that down, kind of deal. Different methods, different techniques, kind of deal. And then there's the whole like chakras, and so I go up, I go down, and then I put focus and energy and visualize these things as, in different ways, like flowers opening, or stars being formed, kind of thing. The more I can add my imagination to it, the greater that my subconscious starts to play. And so there's a realm between imagination and your subconscious that you're no longer imagining thing. It's like where you imagine a dancer, but the dancer starts to dance in ways that you didn't think of, kind of thing. And so there's this like power of imagination, because like they, like for example, they did like this one study of people playing piano that had never played piano. So they give them lessons, and they give them lessons for 6 months. And the second group gets piano lessons, but with no piano. Then they test them on how well they can play piano, and both groups do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you imagine doing something, you are still doing something, kind of thing. Even with, they did like, you can literally get stronger by imagining yourself working out. It's not as like effective as actually working out, but it was like exercises will make you like 50% stronger, while imagining it will make you 15% stronger. So there's still an effect there, kind of
they've
thing.
done so many of those studies, like
Yeah. And so we have this this power of imagination, and I think this is where we can start, where we are co-creating, kind of thing, with the universe. We are using our power that then connects with, because like there's the double slit experiments and in like physics. Do you know what that is?
Oh yes, like whether or not it's being, well, walk us through it either way.
So essentially they like send like light particles, and light is a particle or a wave, kind of deal. And so they shoot it through a single slit. They can see on the back the pattern. So like, okay, yeah, these are particles. But then they shoot it through two slits, and it becomes a wave. And you're like, wait, what is it doing? But then you put an observer or a camera to see what it is, and it becomes particles again. And so when it's observed, then it becomes that state. Ultimately, it's in superposition, or it's everything. The Schrodinger's cat,
Mm-hmm.
in which it's alive and dead simultaneously.
Until it's perceived,
Until it's perceived, kind of thing. And so that power of imagination that we have is putting our attention. And so where our attention goes, energy flows. And so ultimately we are just energy. And so we're aligning those energies to where we're putting our attention. And so magic, to me, is ultimately, where are you putting your attention? Because that everyone does magic. Everyone is manifesting something. Everyone is creating, or being a magnet that is attracting things. But are you aware of that? And so that's where that meditation process comes in, because you're increasing your ability to put your attention on something. So there are so many different ways to do it. Like you can just put your attention on a candle, kind of thing. But then that skill, or like a muscle you've now worked out, you've gotten stronger, kind of thing, you can then put more attention on something else. Carnegie, whatever his first name was, he was like one of the first like millionaires in America
Mhm.
kind of deal. So they're like, how are you so rich? You have to be like cheating the system somehow. And so he gets audited and he's done everything legit. And they're like, how is this possible? And he's all like, because I can think one thing for 5 minutes. And he then asks these like politicians to like, without any other thoughts, just think of it. And no one can last more than 30 seconds. And he's all like, this is why none of you should be leaders.
Mm.
And so 5 minutes doesn't even sound like a lot, but it it is like to like try not thinking for just 5 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And so what we're developing is our ability to put our attention on something. And so our mind is a garden and the attention is the water. And so wherever you water, that's what grows. So you can grow the weeds and then you're stuck in your weeds and eventually you got to bushwhack yourself out of there. And then that's where all the healing stuff comes in because that's part of the bushwhacking, you know, and at some points healing feels like dying because a part of you is dying.
Yeah.
And so it's eventually learning how to cultivate your garden and put the attention where you want it. Put the water on the flowers or the food that you want to grow because you can't bear fruit until you heal the root.
I like that a lot. So one thing that's nice about what you were talking about is how you don't have the arrogance of like, I have this all figured out. And you're also willing to take in information from lots of different sources from all different areas of human history. What are some of the ways that you can kind of scan for new information and see like, is this something new that I could kind of add into my Descartesian apple basket? Or is this maybe something that could be a little bit of a red flag?
I totally get it. First, it's having principles to understand the principles of how nature and yourself work. So I have like alchemy and I have hermeticism and I use those principles, but not being too much of a stickler for principles because if you get too locked into, oh, it is this way, then you don't see how the principle is the base of that expression and it can develop kind of deal kind of so like one of the hermetic laws is there's polarities and so there are opposites in this world kind of thing but ultimately it's a circle and it's a spectrum of degrees in which things are and so especially with you I would call you people that are exploring the spectrum. And so because and that's also a question semi side tangent is I don't know like history of trans kind of thing, so I've always seen it as like a new kind of person, but that may not be true. I don't know, but I see it as an exploration of the spectrum of opposites in or following degrees of the circle. And so a lot of people see things as black and white. That's like that hard dualism of just this is how it is, that's how it is, this and that, and ultimately they're this kind of thing. And so there are a lot of things like this, like pain and pleasure are in a cycle kind of thing. And so like the point is that you find a balance, that yin yang kind of deal, that there is this like there's always gonna be a bit and you can't eliminate it but you can moderate it, you can balance your angels and your demons kind of thing, and you also don't want to be like 100% fully light great angel super being kind of thing because you're then not looking at the darkness, you're not looking at where you're ignorant. So if I took like, oh yes, I've studied 200 some odd books about this and I definitely know this is the answer to this, and even then those are just books. Those were written by people that also could have biases, that don't know everything, that may, kind of thing. So where I'm taking like that, how to discern the information is like, first I found principles or truths that are always going to happen. Gravity is always going to happen. There's going to
Mm-hmm.
be polarities. Everything is got vibration. You know, we don't actually ever touch anything. What happens when you touch something is the force field of your atoms hits the force field of those atoms, which then gets interpreted as an electrical signal into your brain, which then hallucinates this experience of reality, because ultimately you're not seeing anything out there, you're seeing it in here.
Mm.
Especially like when your eyes are actually flipping everything kind of deal upside down, your experience happens here, not out there. So everything's this energy, and if you can see all the energy of things, but back to like discerning that truth or whatever, is one part is I learned principles. One part is I learned how to talk to my intuition, talk to my heart, talk and have conversations with the inner kid in me, and that allows me to better discern truth, because it's like there's a feeling that I now am like going and being like, this feels off, or this feels like this is exhilarating, this is like catching my attention for some reason, let me look into this. And then usually those things that catch my exhilaration, and it's not that I haven't like, oh, I know all the truth, I was all good, like I've definitely fallen for things. I realized that a lot of times too, there's so much, we're overwhelmed with information, and a lot of things are complex and nuanced and faceted, and we have just like a snidbit of information or a summarization kind of thing, which can be helpful, but using that as your entire basis of what that means, like the depth of things kind of deal, you only hit that surface thing, which the surface thing may be true, but it may not be true about everything. And then I also like put everything as like 99% of the time, yeah, that's going to happen kind of thing. Gravity's going to whatever, but even gravity has anomalies. And so there's those like tiny percentages of like, that's some weird shit, I can't explain that, I don't know. And taking in a lot of the what I call the bullshit information, because there's a lot of that, is like, you know, how does this help me? How, because if information is a tool, how is this going to help someone, or is this, you know, hurting someone? Is this knife that I'm using making a sandwich, or am I stabbing myself? Like, so what is the use of this information? What is the, you know, point? Because you know, a lot of it is that I see like in normal shit is like, fear this, fear that, be afraid, let me show you how scary, the world's full of monsters kind of thing. Let me show you the monsters, look at the monsters, don't go outside, don't be powerful, don't look into your, like, the system or where we are, this dimension, it is meant to be fucking hard, it is difficult, it is fucking challenge, it's horrifying, but it's also beautiful. It is also, you know, and so if we're taking our garden and we're putting it toward that beautiful thing, putting it toward the food that so we can feed more people, or are we diving into the fear, letting the weeds grow, hiding ourselves kind of thing? Because that's the power that we have, that's our like true power, is to put our attention on what we truly desire, or, you know, what we want to see in this world, and everything's going to try to pull you away from that, and you will be challenged on trying to put your attention on what you want, because life is going to come up with things, and then the world of monsters and darkness is going to come in, and it's going to be like, hey, we're here too. And it's not about like everyone waking up and building this new greater society, because you don't need everyone to do that. You need 7% of a population. And so it's not about the majority. The majority is not, doesn't have the power, because the majority give their power to something else. This whole system of, like how we have now, we have like Trump and all that stuff, because they're ultimately people that are just terrified, and they are seeing things in this black and white box, and things that are outside of that box scare the fuck out of them, and they're totally scared. And so we see some of the most scared people, because when you're afraid, you're not going to think rationally or logically.
Right.
And when someone comes and says, I have a solution so that you do not have pain, and let me just take you over here. Oh, don't worry about the fences. They're keeping the enemies out, not you in. Let me take some of your rights, and then I will get rid of your pain. And so we live in a time of, misinformation and manipulation and control, and, and ultimately there are people that are going to be this, the darkest of the dark, the, people who make money off wars and selling weapons and trafficking children and stuff. And that's gonna fucking exist. But it doesn't have to be that they're the ones in control. What has always changed the world is a small percentage of creative people. And so it's not about convincing the masses. It's about cultivating the community. It's creating the small community that can create the change, kind of deal, that can create something from nothing. Because that's what the artist does, is takes from the darkness and says, look at this. This is the light I can make with the darkness. And so, like with alchemy, it's about meeting those opposites, those polarities, and bringing them together. And then with that common Christianity, it's saying there's only light. Do not look at the dark. Never look at the dark, kind of thing. And so if we can, do that thing of looking into ourselves, taking those opposites, kind of deal. I mean, to be like vulnerable in my own darkness, I'm an ADHD dopamine seeker. So when psychedelics came, I got way too heavy in the sauce. And, I mean, I still smoke weed like every day. I'm straight up like that. I have, and people are like, well, it's not that bad of an addiction. It's just weed. And I'm like, I know, but it's still an addiction. Like, and I know that's part of my journey, my path. Cause like, cause also once you like get through healing your shit, then you realize, oh man, I came from a lineage of people that also did not heal their shit. And now I also have to do that healing of the generational trauma. So I come from a long line of alcoholics. And so mine's not alcohol, but, it's still an expression of that. And that comes from my heritage.
Yeah. And they had an amazing version of that process on Sex, Love, and Goop. I know, Ace, we've talked about that a lot on the show, of just kind of healing generationally. And that was a really interesting process. But yeah, I mean, healing is really hard and scary. And I know I've mentioned this before too, but it can feel so vulnerable, because you're finally taking down all those walls that maybe made you feel tough and maybe kept you safe when you had to be kept safe. But now it's like, if I really want to feel the depths of pleasure and comfort and safety, I have to face all the other feelings that I didn't want to feel, and the sadness and the heartbreak and that I didn't want to face. I'm realizing that if I really want to feel in my body, I have to accept all of it. So it's very much different than, this makes me uncomfortable, it's probably fake news, or another version of it. I had a friend make this comment on social media that I thought was so brilliant, that with the way we were raised, if you can kind of say that other people that you disagree with are being like, the devil is giving them ideas, or they're demons, or something much more extreme, it's basically this immediate way to have less empathy for your fellow man that you're connected to, because, oh no, that's the devil, that's demons
Mm-hmm.
influencing people. And I realized too, like another version of that growing up was like, oh, the devil is giving you the negative thoughts. And I just remember like I had a certain point in my adulthood, I was like, wait, but like therapy can make that go away. Like I have a nicer inner dialogue now. So does that mean I vanquished the devil? It's like, no, I just went to therapy. Like, but when you give them these extreme, I think there's so much of the kind of religious theater of needing the goodest good guys and the baddest bad guys. And they like stories that fit into that. And then you connect that right into a media landscape where it's very well documented that there's an addiction to that fear. There's an addiction to feeling rage for red versus blue, like where it's so well documented how much people get a high off of that. So then it doesn't really matter who the boogeyman is. They'll just find a new one because it's something to get you scared. So to tie that around too, trans people have always been around, and gender fluidity and sexuality fluidity all throughout nature. And, so much of the gender binary came out of colonialism and control and things like that. And its history is much more recent than people think, than strictly biology.
Yeah.
But for most people that don't know that they have met a trans person, which again is really only like 1% of the population, they can be scapegoated as this thing to be afraid of. And then what do you need is someone to help fix the problem, even though there's not a problem. And then we kind of have that pattern in people that are just led by that fear. So I've definitely can relate to that too, is if I'm hearing information from somewhere else, it's like, is this really well crafted to make someone scared, or is this just some more information? So that's usually something I kind of run it through myself, because I think a lot of the times the things that like the Christian other side that I'm not so much a part of anymore, it's like when they're afraid of something, but they also don't really want to be informed on it. My thinking from what I've learned is like, in some ways it's way worse than you think, but in a lot of ways it's not. And there's a lot of beauty that you're missing out of by just staying away from an entire, thing that's foreign to you. So, it's good to try and be informed, but also overwhelming, and healing is hard, and
Feeling is hard.
Feeling is hard. But I like that idea of like, there's all these different spectrums, and there's extremes that you want both. So when someone presents you with an idea that's almost a little too black and white, then that could be kind of a red flag on its own. Is interesting.
And what you said with like fear, because fear boils down to the unknown. When you're in a state of not knowing, it's not certainty kind of thing, gun to your head, you don't know what's going to happen next. You have to have a willingness to change or face that fear. I think honor that fear, feel that fear, because all your emotions are a message. Mm-hmm. They're a message from your soul trying to tell you something. So that fear is showing you this is something you don't know, kind of thing. And are you willing to go into that unknown, mm-hmm. kind of thing? How can you use that energy to help you? I remember growing up and thinking being older is just adopting more things to be afraid of. Oof. I don't think that way anymore, but I think that came from just the trauma growing up, is that I was in a state of fear growing up that was just constant. And then I just kept getting more things to be afraid of until a point where I was a shaking chihuahua and kind of thing. But then I started to look into what I was afraid of. And when I looked into those unknown places, I realized I made the boogeyman, I made the devil, I made these things so much more terrifying, so much more heinous and extreme and gruesome kind of deal. And that was also part of me not knowing how to control my imagination. And part of that meditation helps with learning, being like, because I would have a lot of those, what we call, intrusive thoughts of like, like this dog right here can jump and kill me or whatever, or this stranger, especially in LA. And then also too, some of the worst things that ever happened to me, I never thought to even be afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I learned that fear wasn't even a good
indicator, predictor of
actual of what is actually happening, right, kind of thing. And it's the same thing with like worry, kind of deal, because I used to worry all the time. I was always trying to like be like, I need to set up my Lego house for the future, otherwise it'll break and fall. And I just thought of all the, and that was me lost in my own thinking, and not even realizing that I was, that the filter or whatever, the unhealed part of me is just, it's trying to keep me safe because I grew up in a chaotic environment. And there was a point where I learned about being in the present and how I wasn't in the present, and I was just in all these filters. So initially I went with, oh, well, then I'm going to just stop thinking altogether. So I just constantly just never thought. I was just like, nope, it's a thought. What am I going to eat today? Ah, no, that's a thought. Ah. And so now I kind of take it as I'm listening, because essentially what I wanted as a kid is just to be heard and seen, which pretty much everyone does. And now I'm listening to it, whatever my thoughts would be, and then having a dialogue or having a conversation with the multiple fucking personalities of me. It was kind of like, instead of like having splits of personalities when I was in my like psychotic breakdowns and stuff like that, it now becomes like, I'm a collective of self. And so we together, all the different thoughts and different voices kind of thing, because we have these characters. All of us have these characters. We have the person that's showing up here today. There's the person that's the the one that's going to go to your job and do the things kind of deal. But there's also a part of you that's the hurt self. And then there's also the fun self. And these are my terms for it. So I'm taking part of this from Jill Taylor's fucking book, Whole Brain Thinking. And she's this neuroscientist that had a stroke and was able to analyze her stroke while having the stroke. And she has like one of the most famous TED Talks. But she talks about how we have, this right and left hemisphere, and then we have these like three part, if simplifying, like there's tons of parts of the brain and whatnot, but we simplify it down to these like general areas. And so it's like the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and then that lizard brain, that brain stem, that's where our fear response center kind of is. And so then it's also shown that people who have been through trauma or severe trauma or constant trauma have a larger brainstem, so they go deeper into the fear than most people. And when the brainstem gets activated, it goes into that fight or flight, freeze, fawn kind of thing, and it will override the prefrontal cortex or the rational thinking kind of deal. And you are no longer the controller or the CEO or the king in the old language kind of deal. And so if the left limbic system is your hurt self and the right limbic system is your fun self, and then you have that higher self, which is going to be the right prefrontal cortex, and this is that getting into that whatever, connecting to that intuition, that divine connection, the imagination, the creativity. This is where we can have these insights of learning into ourselves, and that's where that stillness, silence, and solitude come together. Because if our left is just like the think, and then when something hurts us, and that's like our wounded inner child saying, hey, I don't want to have ever experienced the thing that happened before kind of deal. And then we also have that, what I also call the inner child, but that's the fun child. That's the one that, when you're having fun, hours pass as minutes. And when you're not having fun, minutes pass as hours. But we also have to cultivate a time without the thinky or the feely. And so if those, the think and the feeling are just the filters, when we silence everything down, we get into the, what the Buddhists call the pure mind kind of deal. And that's the energy that just, it's subtle, but it's the energy that permeates you. Like, for example, feel your hand. Just put your energy on what your hand, there's a feeling. You can feel something, a sensation or whatever. I call that reality. And if we're in that sensation, that is what is really happening. And it only happens now because we only exist now. And like psychologically, time doesn't exist. Like our, that hurt self is still hurt from, but it's happening in real time to them always. Everything is always happening now, kind of deal. And so even if we are worrying and imagining the worst possible situation, we're imagining the worst possible situation now. And then our brain feels like that is happening now. So when
Interesting.
we're putting that energy or our attention on that, we are creating that within ourselves now. And so, and so that worry becomes anxiety. It is turned into the anxiety. And then that anxiety is the energy saying, hey, you need all this energy to protect yourself, defend yourself, or do something with kind of deal. But if it's all just like, oh, what if this could happen? What if this could happen? But what if that could happen? And then you're just sitting and ruminating on the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. Then you're feeling more and more, you're gaining more of this anxiety energy because it's saying, hey, you need to save yourself. We need to get you. And then people take, oh, I just have anxiety. And so like, well, you don't just have anxiety. It's created somehow,
You're basically taking a potential stressor in the future and putting it right here in the present. Guaranteed slot.
and your brain doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Like your subconscious will not know, oh, and because we talked about that power of like imagination and it's doing those things. So the more you're imagining the worst case, and this works in the opposite direction where we go into the past and we ruminate, oh, I should have done this, I could have done this better, I wish I did this or that or whatever. And then this is just not letting us move on from those things. And a lot of depression can be here too, is because depression is lack of expression. It is suppression of an emotion. A lot of times it's anger, but it doesn't always have to be anger. But definitely for me, it was anger, because growing up, there's so many times where an anger is that your boundaries have been broken. So the guardian anger, which is a secondary emotion, because ultimately it's defending you, and it's could be defending you from fear. It can be defending you from embarrassment. And so, recognizing, oh, my anger is here because I'm afraid of this, because when I was a child, this happened to me and I don't want that to happen to me again, kind of deal. And so learning to healthily express my anger, which really all of it just comes down to communication, is being able to be vulnerable and say, hey, I feel hurt because of this. And because I've been hurt in the past because of this, and I just don't want to be hurt again because of these things. And this is why I'm upset about these things. But in not just being like, well, now I need to throw my cup because no one's listening to me.
Yeah. No, I've learned to really have like a respect for anger is in the same way that you would feel like defensive about a friend and be like, I can't believe they did that to you. Like lots of times my anger was telling me that there was like a violation, like you said, or maybe someone acted in a way that's not in alignment with my own values. So I've tried to honor it, listen to it, and like you said, dig down because it is that secondary emotion. But I think it can be hard, and it's also interesting from a gendered perspective because women aren't allowed to feel anger and men are pretty much only allowed to feel anger. And so to basically avoid both of those extremes and be like, okay, what is this thing? Let me look at it. Oh, it's actually just really mad that someone mistreated me. And I don't like thinking about that. So I've been ignoring it, but now it's actually be grateful that you have that kind of defender can be a positive thing for sure. But I also like, so there's the idea of doing our best to take care of ourselves, of course. I like the idea of, sweep in front of your doorway and then the whole world will be clean, that kind of thing. But I also really like what you talked about in terms of building our communities and taking care of our communities. This was something I was just talking about with my life coach, because especially in a time of so much uncertainty and it feels like there's so much power to do damage in our lives and affect our day to day, to try to just do the best taking care of our neighbor right now. And I saw this great post that was like, if you want to be invited to a game night, then be the kind of person that plans out game nights and invite your friends over. So that's going to be kind of a new theme for me in terms of building community and taking
Mhm.
care of the people in our orbit, because otherwise you could just be completely like frozen in fear about what could be and what could change and how much there is outside of our control. So focusing on what we can, taking care of our people and our cats.
Yes, always.
Oh, that's such a cute
uh,
sound.
yeah, I think that the community thing too, going for that Christian mentality, is like that's people's way to um, have just like community. And so it's that like group, there's just like, this is my community kind of thing. And we have this like, I don't some people call it tribalism, but there's like two ways to take that. Like,
Sure.
there's your tribe kind of thing, or like your spiritual tribe. There are people, like, we've done this show over and over and over kind of thing. So I believe reincarnation and resurrection are the same kind of deal. And so we have like soul families kind of deal. And so we have played these, shows, these lives, these, dreams that, like how we're talking about Midnight
Mm-hmm.
Mass. And we've connected with energies of others kind of thing at a stronger level. And so that's like these like soul families, and that's like the tribe. And then there's this
Mm.
like tribalism of just being like, well, I need to be part of something, because throughout history, if you were annexed or excommunicated out of society, you didn't survive. Like, Mother Nature, there's not very many people. I can go out into nature and be like, yep, I'm gonna just live out here and be off the grid. Like I've done some foraging and stuff, but I can survive maybe like a week, and then I'm like, God, I'm hungry. But like, so there's this like tribalism ish thing where it's just like, okay, well, I must defend this community at all costs,
Yeah.
because this is the only way I'm going to survive. And that survival instinct, I think, connects into that. And part of our survival instinct is part of our ego. And so when our ego, what we identify with, becomes that I am Christian, but ultimately, no no one is a Christian. That's a title, that's a label, that's not anything. Like where you say like Jesus wasn't a Christian, because no, it's not about that. It's not about being Christian. Like, Christian doesn't make you good. It doesn't just be
Mm-hmm.
like, I am holy because I am Christian kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. There's, you don't just jump through some hoops and you'll be rewarded at the end kind of deal. It's not this just game. It's not a zero-sum game where there are winners and losers. It is just us all together. And it's how deep we connect with ourselves. And the deeper we connect with ourselves, the deeper we connect with others. And so
Mm.
in Hinduism, they have Indra's net. And where Buddha comes in is Indra's net. They're talking about all the individual nodes kind of thing, is that we're like an individual node. You're an individual node of energy. You're this little dot of consciousness in a super consciousness. And so then Buddha comes in and it's all like, no, it's about the connections. It's not just being this individual. Like, yeah, you can like go into an ashram and like disconnect yourself from life forever and never, and then be at this like what I call super monk mode, because I always love to see the like Shaolin monks, and they like bend the swords against their necks, or like dry their clothes by putting them on their backs and moving the blood to their back to then dry their clothes. And so it's like you have these like crazy superhero people, but then there's also that you are meant to connect with others. Like, we're not meant to just like completely divide from this thing. At least that's not how I see it. I see it that we're meant to interweave. We're supposed to lock together to like build those communities kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've ultimately lost in this we're still living in this like nuclear war, um, building families of just like mom, dad, two kids, get in your underground basement because everything's going to be nuked kind of thing. And we've lost our communities. We've lost the village. So we get trained, I guess, as kids to be like, okay, you're going to grow up and provide for society and we're all going to work together. And then come into it and it's all this individual, well, especially in America, it's this like dog eat dog individualism. But if you're rich, then it's socialism. But if you're poor, well, just pick up your bootstraps. What are you doing? You're not working hard enough. You're sleeping still. What? Who does that? And so the healing that we need to do is creating these stronger communities or rebuilding, because like social media is no longer even social media. It is an entertainment platform, and that's what people are using it for. It used, like, if you're 2008, people are having conversations, that social medias were social medias, but now social medias are not the Instagram, Facebook, or whatever the things are called now. But like, you have people on Discord channels, you have, so social medias exist. They're just not what we necessarily are looking at, and things are evolving always kind of deal. But I think we have to, one part, use the internet to build communities, because that's how we can better meet each other, but then also build real world things that are creating spaces for community, because there isn't a lot of, like, where can, like, you have churches and that creates a space for those communities kind of thing, but unfortunately that space for community is just a group thing weapon in order to control people's minds. And so, because like even spiritual, like I once was going to do ayahuasca with this like group, and then I was all like, I don't feel right about this, and it was pretty much just a cult kind of thing. And so even like psychedelics that can be this like gateway or super highway to healing, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Like Charles Manson used acid to convince people of his methods kind of thing, putting people in a more vulnerable or state, or where you absorb more information kind of thing. And so it's like these things are tools and they can be used either way, since it is just a circle kind of deal. And so we're having to build communities, but also not build communities stuck on just groupthink of that. This is just how it is, of these like, set rules, and just taking and adopting someone else's and being like, okay, well, that's me now.
Yeah.
Or like,
and this is my team and everyone else is wrong.
Yes. Everyone else is wrong. And so what I loved is the opposite of a nuclear bomb is music, because music gathers people. It brings people together. And some of the biggest artists have stadiums of thousands of people kind of thing. And so for me, the greatest weapon is creating culture, creating community. And one way to do that is through music kind of deal. And so the healing at a community or cultural level is going to be done through art. And I think right now we're having like Hollywood has left Hollywood. So due to the strikes, they have like stuff that's being shot as LA is done in Canada now. So and I think that's also a great thing, because I think all the people that are here that are those creatives that want to create a better, form of creation, because there's so much like trash TV. There's so much what it like reality TV shows. Like, it's not something that's like, oh yeah, this is really changing the world with your expression of art kind of deal. I mean, maybe it is, but it's maybe not the best change we have. And so I think if we, as creatives, start coming together to bring in those new ideas, because right now I think it's like that Hollywood's pulling out the same formulas, same shit over and over, and it's the same thing in music. You know, you're hearing the same stuff over and over, repeat it, and like we've gone so far into like the shock value of like where nearly every song's just about sex now, and it's just like, okay, well, that's old. It's it's what are you saying? Or it's about a relationship, or it's about not being in a relationship, and so it's just like these are the only things that are safe, and most people are just playing in those like safe molds, I guess. And right now, I mean, so for me, the new year happens on the equinox, but we're entering the year of the snake, and the snake needs to shed its skin. And so right now, we're going to see things fall apart. This is the time of dying. This is the time in which systems, and because Pluto has moved into Aquarius and it'll sit there for 23 years, and Pluto is the power planet, and Aquarius is innovation. We are putting power in the transformation of innovation. We see this now with AI, and it's going to leaps and bounds upgrade. Things are going to move real fast this year come spring, and it's going to go boop, 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 boop. But also things are going to fall apart. And I think right now we're seeing things are crumbling. Things are getting, you know, capitalism is eating itself, and this is the falling apart year. And like, it's got to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately, and it's going to be extreme in both sides. We're going to have I think, extreme change that's going to bring in something that will be the new possibilities, breaking down these old foundations that have been in control for so long, and a way to actually start reconnecting, because we are disconnected from ourselves, we're disconnected from other people, you know,
Right.
and we're these like, and you know, like I like to say, the zombie apocalypse happened, and that is a lot of people that just, like my roommate, he's always on his phone. Like, he's never not on his phone. He has crashed his car 3 times from doom scrolling. And what that is just dysregulated emotional states, and he doesn't know how to regulate his emotions, so he goes for the dopamine spike of the thing that he knows, kind of thing. And it's just, you know, like, even he watches TV whilst just staring at a phone. Like, there's never a time when he doesn't have his phone. Like, we didn't have that power for like whatever, and he was in his car charging his phone on like kind of deal. So it's like, there's never a time. And so that's what I say is that zombie apocalypse kind of deal.
Well, it's also kind of like what you said about, can you think of something for 5 minutes, or think of nothing for 5 minutes?
I don't think he can think of anything for 5 seconds.
But it's, I mean, you know, it's cheap dopamine, and I think we all could, yeah.
I mean, I'm
become
a
very
dopamine
addicted
seeker.
to it.
I
But
get
but it does. But we can kind of take, as much as this can all be very overwhelming, we can take some positives away from this that continue healing for ourselves and tending to our garden, but also because that allows for such great, rich connections with other people. I feel like there are some people I've met very recently, but because they've done that healing, where it's a way tighter connection. And so building our communities, building new churches, making art from a place of honesty, of course, is, if we can, and not just have to do it for understandably the financial reasons that make it Hollywood turn out the same things in commerce. But there are still things we can focus on: growth, healing, art, community, and survive from there through what might be some scary times. But thinking of it like the snake shedding its skin, some things will fall away, and new beginnings. Well, how about you, Ace? Anything you'd want to throw in here?
I am good. I'm just enjoying the conversation, just listening with it. So
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here, Leo. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of wrap up with, or even just any other resources you might throw out that people might want to look at? You mentioned a bunch of great, like, books, TED Talks.
Oh gosh, I mean,
I can also link them below if you want to send me links.
okay, I might do a couple links, but there are a few that, like, I guess, like, stand out. Like, Mark Pazio has a million lectures, but he's got one. It's 8 hours, and I know that's long for a lot of people, but there's a lecture on natural law, on which is just kind of like immutable principles of the universe, and how we're ultimately, how when we're in those sphere states, that we express that, how it then expresses into ununderstanding chaos, and if we can then find the love in ourselves for ourselves, that's where we find the harmony, grace, compassion kind of thing. And this is, which ultimately, like, that old school Christianity kind of thing is psychology. Before we called it psychology, it was therapy. I mean, we even have like, there's another guy who's like studied the history of psychedelics, and original Christianity was making home brews of psychedelics so that people could experience this, like the sacrament, the Eucharist is a psychedelic. It's, and the, because the bread of Christ is ergot. Ergot has LSD. Ergot is a parasitic fungus that grows on rye and wheat kind of thing. And so you can, through processes and also the heating process of making the bread, will remove the poisons from the ergot and then leave you with the LSD. Yeah, we can get into more of that stuff later, but yeah, ultimately, I think we live in a world that has told us to believe in this thing in order to not let us see the truth of ourselves. And that we are the divinity. We are the, everything exists within us. I am God and the devil. And I can see I am the God. I am the devil. I am all, and I am also this individual little dude that has all these energies in me, kind of thing. And if we can just look at ourselves, look at the patterns, put our attention on what we want to grow, like how you said, clean your doorstep and we can clean the world. Well, build your garden and everyone else will build a garden.
Beautiful. All right. I think that's a very positive place to end for all of the heavy things we covered. So thank you so much for being here,
you.
Leo. Thank you as always, Ace, and we'll catch up with everyone on the next episode of Holy Unapologetic.